my friends. Welcome to Citizen Central Podcast. This is your monthly stop at the talk shop where we get to talk about Star Citizen, what's been going on, and the big topics really of the game. And this month we've got a good topic. I mean, it's December. It's the end of the year. It's time for us to look back and reflect a little bit on all of the different interesting things that have occurred this year, particularly when talking Star Citizen. Obviously, it's 2024. It was not a quiet year by any means, but Star Citizen had just all over the place, really. And some would say it's been a good year. Some would say it's been a terrible year, but I think all can agree that it is a year of things to talk about. So I brought 4 great people who make their own streams and videos about the game to talk about those exciting things. And hopefully you guys enjoy the show. Thanks for coming, everybody. Let's listen to where everybody comes from, though. XeroState, first guest of the day. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you come from. Why are you here? What do you do?
I come from the snowy land of Minnesota, and it's cold. It's currently 3 degrees outside, Fahrenheit, which is chilly.
No.
And I stream a lot. I play a lot of Star Citizen, some other games, and really love the project. I backed it in 2013. In and out for many years. Came back, been a big part of the community, hopefully. I don't know. Wish for good things. I've been known by many names recently. Zero. Let me see. Wish.com Space Cutlet. The guy that I watch when Burks goes offline. A few others.
Twitch actually tells me that. It's like, hey, Burks is offline. Check this guy out. Wait, so I have always wondered this, though. Where does the hands joke come from with the Sulant, or what was it, the Santok Yai, I think? There was a joke about your hands using it.
I don't remember exactly the origin of it, but Jared picked up on it at one point, and so then it became a thing in the community. Where, because like the Sulan and the Cartual, they both have the ball that you grab onto, and I don't remember what I did or something where Jared picked up on it at one point and made fun of me in an ISC.
Well, I've talked to you many times, and I know you for many different things, but for some reason, still, that's what I think of first when I hear your name, unfortunately. Well, that or either
me fondling chip balls. Thank you.
Yeah, or that you're online while Burks is offline.
Oh, okay.
Good memories, yeah. Ollie, my friend, thank you for joining me, man. How about yourself?
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. I love talking about Star Citizen. Been doing it a while now. It's good. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, you do a whole bunch of gameplay videos. I think a lot of people know you for just getting out there and running generalized gameplay of Star Citizen and giving people a good look at it. But you came from other games before this, right?
Yeah, there are other video games, apparently. A bit
No
of
way.
Grand Theft
Surprise.
Auto. I know. I've forgotten what they are now, though. Just Star Citizen. But yeah, no. GTA, I've been around a long time making videos. I think I'm approaching like 3,000 videos on YouTube, which is a lot of talking. A lot of me listening to myself talking. And I don't know if that's good for me. I don't know. But
Dude, it's like when YouTube tells you like how many hours of listening to you people have done, and it's way more hours than like what you had actually put out. You're like, this isn't okay. Almost feel like you should take it offline because it hurts the people to. Well, that's just me, I guess. You have an accent. People like that here.
Apparently, people tell me the accent is a thing. I don't hear an accent. I don't know why anyone.
You don't hear an accent.
It's perfectly normal to me.
Yeah, that would make sense. Thank you for joining me, man. Appreciate you. CasaBlack, how about yourself?
Yep, I joined about almost 4 years ago now, and within my first year, I had already been making like guides for other survival games and things like that, and I liked the community so much and the project, and it was fun to follow, so I jumped in and started trying to make this something I wanted to do. Not full time because I do have a regular job, but just something to do. Pretty steady. I've enjoyed getting into the roadmap, which a lot of people know me for. Some people know me for my beginner guides. Overall, I just enjoy helping people try to get into the game. And lately, it's been more of throwing up a shield to try to help new players not get so let down by what they're seeing, because some are new to this still and they believe everything they see at first or hear. So, just trying to keep expectations where they should be and, introduce new people to the game.
Even some of us not new people still believe just so much.
Some.
We've talked a couple times on the Launch Sequence podcast, just recently actually, about roadmap changes and whatnot. I am very interested in hearing what you think of the upcoming year with the roadmap and the letter from the chairman and what he was saying. That'll be good to touch on.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me, man. Yep. Griffin, my friend.
Hey, how are you? GriffinGaming RPG. I'm one of the co-producers with the Soul Citizens. We do various streams, community streams, and our own team streams on Sundays, Saturdays, and Thursdays. In fact, today is going to be the last of the Soul Voices series that we've been doing. We're going to be working on some new projects in 2025. But yeah, always happy to be here. Great conversations, great people to be here with today, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, man. Always good to have you. Always good to be on the Soul Citizens. I've got to get on another episode there soon, now that I'm finally back in the time zone with you guys. It's always that always causes so much difficulty in the summers, but looking forward to getting another show.
Yeah, we do our cycle. It comes around.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining me today. We've got an interesting talk ahead of us because, like I said, 2024 is an opinionated year for this game. Obviously, expectations were set. I will come right out and say I don't think those expectations were met, but we still got to see some exciting stuff. So we're actually going to start by hitting the most recent thing that's been going on for folks, and that is 4.0. We were talking about this before the show. Let's get deeper into it. How has it been treating you so far? The big update, which they were able to get live-ish by the end of the year, and has been running for now, I think, about 48 hours-ish or so. 24 hours? No, yeah, 48 hours. What are you guys thinking? How's it treating you?
Not particularly well.
All right. All right. Elaborate.
Well, okay, so client performance is actually really good. The game is as gorgeous as ever, maybe more so than ever before. The sights and sounds are really cool. I think the music is great. A lot of really good upgrades there. So on a serious note, I mean, I joke about it, but my experience was an unpleasant one. I woke up in Area 18. I got out of a hangar on one account. I got into a black screen 30K. Couldn't get back in because the server was dead. It was either wait 20 minutes or switch accounts. I switched accounts, logged back into Area 18. My hangar was like quadruplicated with other people's hangars. So I had to wait in a queue of like 3 or 4. And when it finally like opened my hangar, I tried to fly out and it kept teleporting me back to the ASOP terminals because it was like trespassing in other people's hangars. And that happened for an hour and a half. So there's no way out. Somebody tried to come get me. They got stored. Now they're stuck at Area 18 with me. Tried server hopping, went back to the other account. Finally got to do some NPC missions. It took me 6 hours to find any PvE content. My content is very much player bounty hunting. And every player bounty that I took didn't have a marker, or the player wasn't on the server, or as I took the mission, it disappeared. So I had a rough night. Not everybody had that experience. Some people had a much better experience, I think, but
yeah,
mine was not a great one. So
as is always the case, it seems with Star Citizen, it's hit or miss, but the hits and misses are pretty hefty right now with 4.0.
Yeah, it's pretty extreme either way usually.
How about the rest of you?
I haven't hit it that much. I just came back from like a cross-country tour, but I basically got in. I wanted to set up my hangar a little bit. I did that okay. Actually was able to leave. I didn't have any kind of duplicating hangars. And this was the first day, probably about 4 or 5 hours into the build. No, actually it's about 7 or 8 because it was the following day. But I got to where I needed to go, and then I had to go, so I logged out. But when I did come back, I started noticing things like, trying to purchase drinks, that it was stalling, rolling, wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. Then I started hearing from other people in my Discord talking about, missions are having issues and things like that, where they're not populating, or there's very little things to do, like as far as missions and stuff. So I've definitely been hearing that there's some issues. Performance is supposedly doing pretty good, though.
About the same story I've been hearing too, yeah. Missions are great because they offered some nice packaged gameplay that's easy for a newcomer to take without having to know much about the game. But when they break, kind of ruins a lot of the game. At least the sandbox gameplay is still there. But yeah, it's I would say my experiences have been similar. I've seen a lot of stability and been able, like, frame rates were good. Server frame rates were actually pretty good. I only crashed maybe a couple times, server crashes, not computer crashes. And like overall, I didn't have too many problems. Interaction lag wasn't too bad except for a couple of times, but there's definitely this sense of degradation, as there tends to be. And it sounds like it's gotten even worse just recently as of the recording of this podcast, where it's Saturday morning here on the west coast of the US. And apparently all missions have just stopped working. So
Yeah, like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Every server.
So we'll see what happens there. But it is an interesting situation because, as everybody has been talking about for weeks, if not months now, the anticipation leading up to every December is that there will be a patch that's left after the break to hopefully tide us over. Specifically with this year, it was like, oh, are they going to do it with 4.0? That would be crazy. And now we are 2 days into the break, and it's kind of like, okay, what's going to happen for the next 3 weeks? Is it can this fix itself? Obviously, there's somebody who's kind of running the back end and keeping things going at the office, but how many people will be there? How many things could they possibly fix during this time? When specifically by the day is most of the workforce going to be back in the office to like really tackle the patch? Is it January 5th? Is it the 7th, the 10th? Like, I think there's a lot of questions there too. But before we move on to that, Ollie and Griffin, want to give you guys time to share your experiences with 4.0, if you've had any particularly.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I don't know. I feel like I'm on a different server because I streamed like 6 hours, and it was only 4 hours into the stream where I fell through the planet. I think a lot of people have seen that before. I think I was on Monarchs or something, and I fell through the terrain. But up until that point, like you say, the client felt really good. It like the FPS in game feels smoother because the server feels smoother. It's really weird. Like, I really noticed it on like recordings and stuff, but like the game felt great. I played the game. I could not believe I went from area 18 to the jump tunnel, through the jump tunnel, did missions, went to a contested asteroid base, got some cool loot, did some missions. I was like 4 or 5 missions deep, and then I fell through the planet. So like, and then everybody, I think as the day went on, started to find issues, and I was just like, wow, okay, so maybe I was a bit of an isolated experience, but I don't know.
I mean, I had a time that sounds like what you had. I think it just over the course of the day, it got a little bit worse.
Yeah, I mean, I have the benefit as I'm like up earlier before you guys, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit more time on a fresher server.
Do you guys, have you noticed the quantum travel transitions any smoother in 4.0?
They had a hot fix that came out that was supposed to actually fix some of those issues and some other issues, except it made everything way worse. So like going to orbital marker, like I got a bug for a while where I got out of a station, and every single time that I quantum traveled anywhere, it would send me towards the Stanton sun. Just turn me and send me in that direction.
Yeah.
I ended up having to re-verify my files, I think, and go back from hotfix back to 4.0 preview channel. And that seemed to help, but it's still a little goofy.
So I know about that one. I was asking though, because there were a couple times when I came into a planet or a moon, and normally when I come out of quantum travel, it hitches like once or twice, but I think it was 2 or 3 times in a row where I came out and it was completely smooth. And I was like, whoa, quantum travel looks pretty cool. Because it just never works like that for me. So I was wondering if that was something that was, I just got lucky, or it was something that everybody was noticing.
I was having a thing just now, just before we jumped on, and I kept quantuming to Bloom, and I'd literally go through the planet and way past it like 70 GM. And I just could not get to Bloom. I was just like going around it. It's like, I just want to go to the damn planet. So yeah, I don't know. Weird stuff now.
That reminds me of when I used to play Elite Dangerous, and I would just I think it's Super Cruise. past my destination over and over because you kind of have to like manage your speed to come in on the right time. And I would just fly past where I was going over and over. Probably do that with Quantum Boost too. Griffin, how about your 4.0 experience? How's it been?
I'm somewhere between you and Ollie. The first couple of weeks, obviously, everything was rough and for everybody. Server errors popping up, things of that nature. But over the last week, it seems like things really evened out. We noticed that they were locking the server FPS was hanging around 28 to 30 consistently. Game frame rate was anywhere from 60 to 100. It just varied. Performance, I think everybody's saying that performance is definitely, we can see that it's definitely improved and a little bit more stable. I did run into the quantum marker issue, both just doing, orbital markers as well as doing a cross system where things kind of were off a little bit, particularly the orbital markers. They were really not doing well. Going down to the planets or the moons wasn't a problem, but if you wanted to go from a certain location to OM3 or to a station, sometimes it would turn your ship just in a different direction, and you'd land someplace different. I did do a contested zone, had a good experience in there. It was also interesting, and this is kind of indicative of the whole LOD thing with this thing. When you load into a station, in those early days, everything was just, frame rates were just terrible. Now when you load in, things load in very quickly, very smoothly. Eyes moving very smoothly. It's been a weird thing. This last week has just been a great improvement to me, and obviously there was a push for getting things done this week. To your point about CIG staffing, I think that we've seen this happen before, where there will be people still grinding at the wheel. Especially when things aren't well during the holiday season. We don't have everybody there, but I think they'll continue to work on it to get it into a better state. I don't think they're going to let it sit, till next year. I don't think that would be good for them to do. To put in a little extra effort during the holidays might be a good thing for them. But that's been my experience so far.
Yeah, they can't just completely leave the office abandoned, right? Somebody's got to be there maintaining an online game.
3.24 now. You don't need to worry about it being broken.
Until that one also breaks, and then they've got to fix two live servers at the same time. No, I think there's. So you're speaking from the context of like 4.0 as it is. There's different ways to talk about Star Citizen. You could talk about it from the perspective of every game, or you could talk about it in the bubble that is Star Citizen performance. As far as Star Citizen performance goes, I would say 4.0 feels like a very, very big improvement on previous stuff. That, like, taking into account that we can't currently see missions, and there are some big bugs that are causing problems, but the things that you guys are talking about that have improved, like the frame rates, the stability, the reactiveness. I've noticed AI being a lot better in fights, particularly on the ground. Those things are steps forward for Star Citizen long term. But as far as the actual patch goes right now, it does sound like it's still in a state that maybe it's not the right time for people to jump back in if they've been waiting.
Yeah, I would say from a tech perspective, obviously server meshing. The player counts on servers are 500 to 600, right? So, or on shards, I should say. So, technically speaking, it's a ton of steps forward. Like I said, the server FPS is because of more dedicated game servers. You're seeing higher server FPS as you go to a bunker, and the NPCs are really reactive, and it's challenging, and they're moving around outside. Lots of cool stuff. It's very difficult to tell a new player, like, yeah, right now, like today is a good time to get into Star Citizen, because they might not be able to leave their hangar. They might not be able to see any missions anywhere. Yeah. And it's like, don't even tell them to play, because who's playing a game like that? You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in a mean way. I just mean it's not the right time until whatever is happening gets sorted out and some things smooth out, So it's not, without being too harsh, I think the honest critique is I'm not going to tell a new player to play today,
I'll be harsh. I sorry, Ollie. I'm just going to say I'll be harsh. I would be in that category almost all the time up until now. Like at any point in Star Citizen's history, more, I think significantly recently with the tech stuff that's been changing, it's really hit or miss. If you tell, like a lot of people have probably experienced this when you invite friends into the game. And you've been having a great time, and you invite that friend in, and they come in, and you get a Saturday, a couple hours aside. You guys are you're ready. It's going to be good. You're pumped. And then you hit every single glitch possible. And your friend is like, dude, this is crazy. I I don't want to play this. This is nuts. But also, you could have an amazing time. And your friend could be like, holy crap, I'm coming back to this. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's what they're saying in this letter from the chairman. That's kind of what they're finally admitting is like, we want to give you guys more of a consistent experience that's impressive and good, because we realize that it is very up and down. And, it's just, this is very indicative of it too. Sorry, Ollie. Go ahead. I just
That's
wanted to get that
alright.
out.
All I was gonna say was, I feel like based on how when I played the server, it was so much better experience, and I feel like all the tech that's gone into this patch, when it works, I feel like if Star Citizen 3.24 can be this good and this bad, I feel like 4.0 is kind of like this. Like, you're still, the range has got more. Like, when it's gonna work, I feel like it's gonna be a better game than
Yep.
when we were at 3.23.4, whatever. Because that experience I had in the morning was really good. But yeah, I feel like also server meshing just creates a lot more range of things going wrong, like markers and everything else that goes along with it. So I don't know. It seems like there's more things to catch, but the potential is obviously there.
As far as performance wise, have you guys been surprised, whelmed, disappointed? Where did this land as far as the 4.0 release?
I was very happy in the morning, but I don't know if I'd be
Slowly degrading now.
happy now. I haven't really played since, so I feel like I need to go back in a second time tomorrow and see where we land. But yeah, my experience that morning it's amazing. It's the best patch ever. This is great.
Yeah. I spent about 5-6 minutes maybe circling checkmate and obituary each, just flying around them just to see what the performance was like with all the debris, all the particle effects, everything else. And I was surprised. The ship I was in, everything just ran extremely smooth. I visited some of the moons, the planets, same thing. I didn't have any of the unfortunate. I've heard a lot of people have talked about falling through planets. I haven't run into that yet. I've seen server errors disappear for me. I know in the early weeks server errors were popping up from time to time. I haven't had one of those pop up all this week. So there's this feeling that they're making progress, not just because patches are coming out, but that the game just feels like there's progress. But then there are those other areas. Obviously, the players come to like missions and stuff that are broken, and that makes it hard for folks. I did a mission last night or night before last, cargo mission. The first one ran perfectly. Took 14 units of something somewhere, got paid. Went behind to do the second one. Brought all the units there, and out of 12 units, it accepted 2, and 10 it wouldn't accept for some reason. So one mission worked, the one right behind it didn't work. 50-50. Yeah. So
reminds me of the box missions.
Yeah.
Good. Jeez. Okay. Well, that's some 4.0 talk, and we'll loop back around to that and how that's all been going. But I do want to get into the year behind us, because that's what this show is about. Really, I'd like to start by asking you guys, what was your thought coming into this year, 2024? Taking us back. This is like, we didn't have any of these CitizenCon advancements. We had seen CitizenCon, right? We knew all the things that were coming. They'd teased the things. Jared had his ISC where he said all this stuff's happening, preview channel, 4.0, this, that in the summer. We hadn't been shown 323 yet, but we kind of knew that a lot of stuff was coming. So going into 2024, what was your expectations?
I think going into 2024, I kind of thought to myself, I'd be surprised if we see 4.0 in 2024. I'm not surprised by how we've seen 4.0 in 2024. Clearly, the last month has been a rush. Some things got kicked off 4.0, which is fine. That happens almost every patch. We're used to that. And it's fine in game dev. It's normal for things to get pushed for the sake of getting something done. But at the same time, I am surprised that it happened. But I'm not surprised by how it happened. I don't know if that makes any sense. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my sentiment on it. It's just like it is a little surprising that they really did like quarter 3 and 4 really. They really did push pretty hard, and props to them for that.
When you say how it's happening, do you mean kind of the anxiety inducing?
it's clear
stressful
that the
push
last
out.
month has been kind of like crunch, get this thing out. Somebody at some point, like up here in CIG, said, hey, 4.0 is going out before winter break. That's a goal. We're doing that. So you guys figure out how to do that. So all of the dev teams below that figured out how to do that. And then they said, let's leave 324.3 live because we don't really trust this patch to make it through the holiday break, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of seeing that all missions have just stopped working on day 2.
So
You know, so and it's all logical, and I'm glad that they did what they did. It was the best option they had, given clearly they had a directive. We're getting 4.0 out before the winter break, you know.
Yeah. This is it's interesting because the whole we don't want a publisher thing was so that there wouldn't be rushed deadlines, mainly for the main game, the full game. Obviously, when you're in the midst of making a game, you can have your own internal deadlines that you push. But it is interesting to still see them struggling with those kinds of philosophies. Now, I think there is a very clear difference between, like I said, a full game being rushed and separate patches or updates being rushed. But I do wonder, what were the decisions? Was there pushback? Like what was the internal feeling at the company surrounding the launch of 4.0? Because I'm sure this was a turbulent time for them. No pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult situation because you go, what a great goal. What a great goal to get 4.0 out this year. You know, that's an awesome goal.
Yeah.
But how that goal comes to be that's a challenge, you know? And the entire, like what I think I said this the other day, like the entirety of the gaming universe has accepted the idea that if you need to delay a patch to make it better, do that. Or if you need to delay a game to make it better, do that. We're all okay with it, you know. And developers, studios have had to fight tooth and nail for that right to, you know, because gamers didn't like that when it first started happening, and now we're okay with it. And now we kind of had this situation where it's like, we were really okay with you guys waiting. Why didn't you? So, and it's all internal decisions, but
I mean, we do say that, but I think there is a lot of anger about where is 4.0. And CIG's feeling it. They're feeling it. They're like, okay, people are getting unhappy. I'm not going to draw any conclusions about why money might be lower, or why people joining might be lower, or where it should be. That's a whole nother conversation. But if there is change, they're noticing it. And like this year has been a lot of people clamoring for 4.0. I mean, it's been 4 years of them talking about it now. So I do think that they had a lot of pressure this time.
I feel like CIG needed to get it out for their own sake because they're done talking about it.
Yep.
Like they covered 4.0. They talked about the planets. They talked about, you know, the lore and stuff like that and the features. And I feel like we can't fill another year of 4.0. I think that was the issue. It's like, well, we need to get it out because we need to talk about the next thing, which is probably base building or more systems. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you even saw that CitizenCon, right?
Yeah.
Like they didn't talk about Pyro.
Yeah. Pyro was a dead horse at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say leading into this year too, you know, CitizenCon last year was one of the first times that we'd heard CIG in a very long time spit out dates. They had stayed away from that. And the whole thing of within the next 6 months, you're going to see this. And by the end of the year, you're going to see that was something that they had been avoiding. So I felt that their commitment to that was important, that they had put that out there. And I also agree that, you know, the road to 4.0 was starting to wear its wear. It needed to come out. It's interesting, though, because to Zero's point, there are some people who felt very much so that, you know, we're big boys, we can wait. We're big girls, we can wait. But there were a whole lot of people on the other side, too, who were like, where is it? You know, I want Pyro. I want server meshing. And they always have to walk a tightrope as far as I'm concerned when it comes to this. Even in this particular case with the 2 lives, which I'm sure you're going to talk about later, you know, there's some question about why did they do that? If it's not ready, they should have waited. But then they give you the option to play 3.24 if you want, and they give you the option to play 4.0, and we're still not satisfied. When do we ever get a push for a major patch like a 4.0? do we really expect that everything's supposed to work? I mean, really? Is that the expectation, that it was
I
supposed to come
expect
out with no
missions to work when
problem?
a patch goes live, but that's just me.
Well, I
Or
agree.
getting out of my hangar, or
But
Hey, at least you spawn in your hangar.
But that absolves the idea of a test environment, right? If it's not a test environment, and we know that in order for us to find that real work, it has to go out to everybody live. It doesn't get fixed in PTU, it doesn't get fixed in the preview channel or a tech preview. It gets fixed when everybody jumps in. That's the only way we get past the hurdles that happen. So it's a frustrating space, is my point. I'm not disagreeing with you about the expectation, but it puts us in a really 50-50 thing. If we don't put it out, and the holidays are here, and people just bought all this stuff during IAE, and they've got time off from work, and they were expecting to play it, and all of a sudden we say it's not going to come out till January or February. You guys know our community; they've lost their minds. So
I think
either way it goes.
You guys are both right there. They needed to have it out because they're not going to get the numbers in PTU. They need to test this, and with progression, they will. And when it's in this preview live, but also there is like a bar. you should be able to run the missions to test those for them.
How many times can you jump out of a hangar? Like, if the percentage of times is like less than 90% of the time, it's not cooked enough. Put it back in the oven.
Yeah.
I think my counterpoint to that only is this something that couldn't have happened after the break? You know what I mean? Like, to rush it out before the winter break is a little, like, it's gonna go live someday, right? Like that, we know that. Why do we have to have the player concurrency on the live servers, which of course does stress things? Like, you're absolutely right, it does stress things in a certain way that helps with testing, but that could have happened after the holiday break too, and it would have been the same situation, except everybody from CIG would have been in the office to triage things rather than on holiday break, which I think is a better option. But yeah, I mean, I see that point too, of like, it's got to come out sometime, and
the less delays, the better. I mean, and that's not universal. I'm not saying that's something they should always say, but for this particular patch, the way that I'm looking at it is like, this patch is either going to come out now, or they're going to release it as the Q1 patch in March, more likely April. So are we going to get a bunch of data now when technically they can get data from people playing the game while the people aren't in the office, versus the people could be in the office while they release it and we're playing it, but like them being in a lot of those people being in the office doesn't actually make a difference, in my opinion. It's probably coming down to like a handful of people, a couple dozen people who can truly make the difference as to how the PU is running at the moment. So technically the other hundreds of people being gone is kind of like efficient in my mind. I don't know. I'm not saying that it has to happen right now. I just feel like if they had waited to try and do this in March or maybe even February, we'd still be in March or February looking at a kind of broken 4.0 and thinking, okay, now they've got to fix whatever problems they've come up with here, and we're just 2 months later than we would have been.
I want to say this too. I agree with, there are expectations that we should have. I think it's very frustrating. I think you guys were talking about this earlier, when a new player comes in, and even us old players, if you log in and you can't get out of your hab, that's frustrating. If you log in and the hangar door doesn't open, that's frustrating. And I think those are the things for me that I think should be as close to being fixed as possible. But when the deeper you get into the game, when things start to pop up, especially after they explain the way missions are doled out, I think the mission aspect is still a very difficult thing, which is why it probably broke when everybody came in, because it's the weekend. And I don't know if we would have gotten that same type of response if it stayed in PTU. And I know it's unfortunate. I don't get me wrong. I want the game to be as playable and stable as possible. But I don't know. I still think it's just a tough decision. And I know some people felt it was being driven by, so that CIG could say they got it out at the end of the year, and that may be the case. I don't work there. But I just felt like they had a commitment that that's what they wanted to do. I think, Zero, you gave the example of how they said, this is what we want to do. I think the departments came back and said, this is what will not fit in if we're going to go by the end of the year. That's why we lost some items, and they pushed for it. So
it's
but they sorry,
it's good.
I was just going to say, they had, by the end, before they released yesterday, an open PTU. So why did it, my question is, why did it break when it went to live?
Because people don't play the PTU.
Way more people.
Way more people.
But my question generally to you guys is like, why do people not want to play PTU? Is it just because people have an expectation of live working better than PTU?
I think
they see it. Yeah, they see it as the actual game.
Okay.
A lot of people don't care about not getting to play the actual game itself.
Which is the exact same reason why when people condescendingly say, just go play 324.3, I go, shut up. You're not helping anybody.
Yeah.
There's no progression. Nobody's playing it. Nobody wants to play it. You're telling me to go play the old PTU.
Yeah, they've now switched places now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's like,
Okay, yeah, but Zero, just go play 324, dude.
how dare you?
So you guys' expectations this year were mainly driven by 4.0. Was there anything else that you were really like looking for this year that maybe would have deemed it a success or would have made it the proper year for you outside of 4.0?
Are you saying something that we didn't get or something?
Either something we didn't get, something we did, just in general, like what you were looking forward to.
I think I'm a little bit disappointed by the strides in reputation, or the lack of strides in the reputation system maybe this year a little bit. I know that, there's always the future and everything, but it's like, man, reputation is such an intricate, it can be such an intricate, deep part of the game, especially with 4.0. It would have been nice to kind of see a little bit more of the design and the plan, at least for here's exactly how the reputation system is going to work, either when 4.0 comes out or as we implement that after 4.0 comes out. Like, here's what you're going to see from the reputation system with all these pyro gangs and with all these, the Stanton security contractors and all these other mission givers. And it just feels like we kind of haven't seen that. Like, reputation doesn't always work with missions. It's kind of arbitrary. It doesn't seem to stop you or give you a whole lot more as far as missions are concerned. And it just doesn't feel exciting. And it would have been kind of cool to have some excitement around that towards the end of the year, I guess, for me.
Yeah, you've got a good point there. Reputation has been a struggle. I know that they worked on it and got it implemented initially, and then they like didn't have a team for a couple of years, and the mission team picked it up a couple of years ago, and it felt like we were going to start to see it take a big effect this year with like Reputation, Hostility, and 323. But then it turned out that was just preparation for the 4.0 edition, which we're only just now seeing now. And it sounds like only 2 of the gangs in Pyro actually function inside of that reputation system. Almost like they're testing it, not quite applying it to the whole game.
Yeah.
Has anybody experienced it?
It doesn't really work right now. Because when the mission fails, because the server 30Ks or whatever it is, or the box goes through the floor, and I lose rep, and then I lose access to the mission or bounty hunting, for example. You try and do your certificates or whatever, and then you have to then do it again because the guy just didn't appear or whatever, and you have to abandon the mission or something. So they need to get that working before it actually matters in the game.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge pain in the bum.
Yeah, but man, the reputation would make such a big difference to this game. I mean, even the way we look at Pyro, people think it's a lawless murder hobos, run free and do whatever they want, and there's just no rules whatsoever kind of thing. But the reputation system is supposed to allow the gangs to still enforce some kind of rules, and that would make a big difference to an expansion like Pyro coming into the game versus the way it is now.
Yeah. I think the idea behind Pyro has always been, people kind of see it as like, oh, it's a free-for-all. It's like, it's totally anarchy. And it's like, technically speaking, that's true. But the reality is they've done a pretty good job of building a lore where you go to Pyro and like, yeah, there's no UEE, there's no crime system, there's no security, there's, none of that. But there's still people who are in control of different places, and you have to live in that space, right? Where you're the politics of it all. It's just a different type of politics, which is more interesting because you're dealing with gangs, you're dealing with, Rough and Ready or, whatever it is. And it's like the headhunters, et cetera. And it's kind of, I don't know, it just feels like if that was there, there'd be kind of that more depth of excitement, If Pyro feels, in some ways, it feels like kind of that mile wide, foot deep kind of gameplay right now, because we're kind of lacking that depth of like, how can I dig into the politics of this system? Yeah,
and that is a very exciting angle for it.
Yeah.
How about the rest of you in terms of expectations for this year outside of 4.0?
I had one, which I was hoping for, and CIG never really gave us a metric, but that was going to be the server cap, the amount of people playing, seeing to the increase. And at one point they were kind of hovering around that 370 number, and I kept hoping they would at least get to 500, but it was nice to see that they've been around 500 to 600. And I feel it at certain places where I go to where there are more people. So I like seeing live activity in the game beyond just NPC activity. So I'm glad that they were able to get the server cap up a little bit higher, and hoping that they can go higher past this number even. So
yeah, this is it's if anything else with 4.0 going live, this is the biggest jump in player cap we've ever seen. We went from 25 to 50, 50 to 100. Next step would have been you expect 200, but now we've jumped to 5 and don't know where it's going from there. But it's nice to be able to look at I mean, not even that. In what was it, Evocati, I think we saw 2,000 people in the same shard. So like this year will definitely be remembered as the year that Star Citizen finally began to achieve real numbers. They're still not big like people are expecting, but yeah, it's a step up this year.
It really accelerated as well. Like I remember when we all got excited. Oh, 100 players in the server. That's pretty cool. And now, like, we were toying with the idea of, between 500 and 1,000 plus or whatever. So that's pretty cool. That is something in of itself.
Expectations have really risen since then too. Over the last couple of years, people are expecting this game to make a lot faster progress, which I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a
like
little.
the sound
I
of it.
was really hoping we'd see the Vault weapons.
Okay.
Shout out to Vault guy.
I'm still holding out hope that those are like some rare loot somewhere in Pyro that nobody's found yet, just a surprise. That'd be so cool. But yeah, I mean, kind of wild that we got that whole Inside Star Citizen episode about all those weapons. And then I don't think most of them showed up. Did any of them show up in Pyro? Does anybody
Where's
know?
my crossbow?
I don't even think we got that weird multi-tool kind of SMG thing. Yeah.
4.1.
Yeah.
That would have made for good loot. You say 4.1, man. I don't like where. I particularly was really hoping for a quantum travel rework this year. And
yes.
I'm very disappointed we didn't see that, because I think that's another thing that really hurts the experience. You hear a lot of people say like, oh, the new star map is good, but it's still the same system we're using to get around it. And I think that system, that update people are looking for is the quantum travel update. Because not only that, but quantum boost, not having to slow boat to a random mission objective, being able to just jump to and from places. And it looks like even quantum boost is basically going to work in atmosphere. So being able to get out of atmosphere faster, just a very nice, both big update, but also quality of life improvement that I thought they would do this year, but did not happen.
We did get the Polaris though, so.
We did get the Polaris. John did say it's coming at IAE, and it will come at IAE. I really wish that some of the other things in game were like the ships. They just
It was
reliably
weird to me that
show.
the captain's quarters were locked.
Are they still
Like
locked?
No.
No, they're open now,
Oh,
but it was just
okay.
like a weird thing that came out, but you can't get in the captain's quarters. I assume it's because it wasn't finished or it hadn't been signed off and they needed to ship it. I assume.
Yeah.
But
It's
It's just
just
a weird thing because it's not a big room.
finishing things up. All right, so moving past expectations, follow-up question to that is, what would you have considered to make this year a success? And I think a lot of people expect an answer, so feel free to give that answer, but I want to hear your guys' personal opinions on what would make this year a success for CIG.
Stable 4.0. Is that fair? I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like if we all got into Pyro and it was stable,
I think
that would
that's
be a success.
yeah.
That was the goal, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. That's fair. Anybody else? Any mentions of Squadron 42? Nobody cares.
No, I think we all like I think we've seen what we're gonna see about Squadron 42 until kind of till it's done.
Yeah, some people were hoping for some better news on a release date, I think.
I see.
Yeah. Some folks were hoping they were going to be like, okay, Squadron 42 is coming out in a couple of weeks. Marketing campaign to start here at CitizenCon, like a 2024 release.
I think if 4.0 smooths out fairly, like either during the break or shortly thereafter the holiday break, then I would consider 2024 at least a marginal success. I think for me, I got really fatigued with seeing new ship after new ship after new ship after new ship this year.
Mhm.
It just felt like they were pumping them out, and I'm like, dude, there's a huge backlog of ships. Like, I know that like they have, they have like the teams work on certain piles of ships at once, like different manufacturers or whatever that they have all the assets for. But it's just like, man, it fatigued me. Like by the end of it, I think the Guardian got announced or whatever, and I just literally in my head, and it's a Guardian Q. I'm a bounty hunter, right? It has a QED. It should be exciting to me, and I'm like, another ship, like less of a focus on that, and more of a focus on things like reputation or things like whatever. And I know it's different teams that do different things, but it just feels like the front-facing focus of like
Go back and play 324-0. Geez.
No. But I mean, what I mean to say is like the front-facing focus of the company seems to have been like, here's our new ship, here's our new ship, here's our new ship, and it's like, I just want to watch an ISC that doesn't announce a new ship.
They were very focused on sales this year, which is interesting because they didn't really add to the backlog too much. Like, we're not seeing concept sales.
Yeah, there's been a lot of straight to flyable, which is nice.
Yeah,
it's been
like
near flyable,
It's like 2018, but replace all of the concepts with straight to flyables.
Fine by me, as long as they keep working on the concepts at some point. But at the same time, like, I don't care about another combat ship. I just want the game,
Yeah, that's the problem. You have so many ships. You just don't have nothing to do with these ships sometimes.
Right. At some point, like, we got like 150 ships now or whatever it is. It's like all these ships are going to have to be gold standarded probably twice more before the game is 1.0.
Dude, that's the big problem.
And it's like engineering has to get done for all these ships. Like armor has to get applied to all these ships at some point. And it's like, you're just making yourself way more work selling these things now, and I know it's part of the funding, and I know it's like a big part of the development, but at the same time, it's like, what's the end game with making more and more and more ships, and I don't know if there is one.
I just sometimes I do wish they didn't do straight to flyables quite so much, and
as opposed to
threw in more like, actually we finished X ship, or we actually delivered the ship that we promised.
More of the backlog ships.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like I don't know about me, but I can imagine a lot of people who backed those original concepts are like, well, okay, you brought out a ship, you've been working on the ship for a whole year, the Zeus, for example. But what about the other ship that was like 4 or 5 years ago that you said you'd be working on? Couldn't you allotted that time for that ship?
The problem with that is, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I can imagine people getting quite upset about that.
Yeah, Venom Merchantman fans out there, where you at? Writhing in your chairs as you listen. Though the problem with that is like picking the ship that has the gameplay that works that they can do, because you can pick a ship from the list, and I think there are a couple for sure that they could work on, but a lot of them are just really specialized at this point.
The Reclaimer came out, and that didn't have any gameplay for a long time.
Yeah, and that was cool. I think why they're not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Was there? Well, I don't know if I was around when that ship came out. Was there backlash on when that ship came out without it working?
No, because it came out at a time where it didn't matter. But
Interesting.
It was released for its hype. Obviously, it was a cool ship. People really wanted it. But I think what everybody realized, including them, when Salvage was being worked on, was that like they got screwed releasing that without knowing how the gameplay was going to work. And if they do that with a bunch of other ships like the Endeavor or the Odyssey or the Galaxy or something, they don't want to have to deal with that again. So it kind of depends, because like I'm like, dude, give us the Ranger, but then they have to work on two-wheel physics and stuff. I think the one thing that they really don't have an excuse for not delivering is the G12 right now.
Yeah.
The Origin.
Well, one thing I noticed that CIG does a lot of is they made like the Scorpius, right? So then not that long afterwards, we got the Scorpius Antares, right? And they take assets, and this is a good thing, right? Their teams take an asset from one ship that they built. They've got logos, they've got panels, they've got seats, they've got like walls, they've got archways, they've got doors, they've got all sorts of things from this ship. And they take that and they put it in a different ship, Polaris, right? RSI ships. So kind of their focus, like for a while, was Drake ships, Corsair, cutters, various Cutlass variants, Vulture. Like these things were all worked on in packs. And so they take the assets that they have for a certain ship manufacturer to get that aesthetic, and they kind of plant that in a section of development. So we saw Drake ships being developed for a long time. We've kind of been seeing RSI ships being developed for a while. We've seen some variants come out, like the Metapin, and things like that. So I don't know. It's logical, but at the same time, it creates a situation where it's like, man, I really wish that my Banu merchantman would get worked on, but there's no teams working on Banu ships right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if they said, hey, here's a straight to flyable Banu ship that's coming out next year, that means they're probably working on some assets for Banu ships, and there's a higher chance, I'm not saying it's for sure, but there's a higher chance that they're working on things like the merchantman, you know? So that's kind of how I see it when I see one, like a straight to flyable ship come out from like Drake or something. I'm like, all right, there's a team working on Drake ships right now. They've got a lot of Drake assets that they just built. I would expect to see this year to see one or two more Drake ships come out. So that's kind of a, I don't know, a hint maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To your point,
Like Misk. Misk has been a recent focus. The Mirai ships get Misk, a lot of Misk parts. The Star Lancer, right? So they could be doing reworks for freelancers. They could be doing more Misk ships. There's at least one team that has a bunch of Misk, what's the word? Stuff. And they have that in their pocket to use, and it's current, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like you're looking for a coherent full game strategy there, and I feel like they're
Unbelievable,
only
I know.
just starting to get
in today's day and age.
Yeah.
Well,
but you can see that too with the
as well. Like the C1, A1, and they did the Intrepid.
Yep, the Crusader ships were a focus for a while.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
You can see that though, even with the messaging on the letter from the chairman, like that Chris is saying, like they are starting to try and switch more towards what you would expect from a normal game environment, the way it's delivered and produced. That's something that I'm working on a video right now that's sort of showing not only Rich Tyrer's influence on the development of the game, but also how he's kind of a product of just the company changing. And one of the things he said multiple times throughout his period of like talking about what he wants to do with the game and how it's changing with the things he's doing is he mentions how things used to be developed with the feature teams and the content teams and how they were kind of disconnected. And he specifically says it's not really traditional. Like this is the only company I've seen where they do that. But then he'll also later on be like, so now we're switching to this format where all of these developers will be together in their teams and more focused and insular and communicative in between them. Something that's a little more traditional. And you can hear that, like those sorts of comments, the letter from the chairman with Chris, even the kind of packaging of ships together, it all sounds a little bit more like a cohesive
plan
push, to get the game developed. I hope that's the case. I know there are also undertones there that people aren't necessarily excited for, but it does seem like that's kind of pushing progress forward. That's something else that I think I'd like to talk about, maybe a little bit more controversial, but there's been a lot of moving around and reshuffling around the company over the last year. Layoffs, people moving around, people joining in. Have you had any like general thoughts on that? I don't want to put you on the spot because I know that kind of stuff can be a beacon, but just interested in hearing your thoughts on how they've been maneuvering through all that. You don't have to be super excited to answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting because what we hear about are the things such as people leaving or layoffs, but we don't hear about the hirings, right? And it's very easy to think that, I don't know, people are always waiting for the sky to fall in some form or that that's some sign of failure or on the area of growth for the company. Many of the people who, like last year, end of last year, there were announcements, and Todd Pappy and a group left then. This year, same thing. We get to the end of the year, we've got some other people who, once again, are leaving. We also know that CIG has been doing a big push for their employees to move to Manchester, and there have been people who've said, I loved working for the company, but I didn't want to move to Manchester. They've got 60 slots of people that they want to hire on their listing right now. The ship team, I think, correct me if I'm wrong if anybody remembers if this is right, but their ship team has grown from 25 last year to 50 now. So there's movement, and it's like there are people who come and go at the company all the time, and they're not always faces that we know. And then there are people who get hired all the time who are faces that we don't know. So it's part of the norm. And considering what some of the other companies, gaming companies, have done with major losses, I think CIG has kind of navigated fairly well. Not everybody's leaving because of something bad. Not everybody's leaving because of something good either. But I just think that it's a part of the rotation there. I don't see it as any red flag that the company is in dire straits or people are unhappy, because there are plenty of employees who post afterward and say that they've enjoyed their time working with CIG and they wish them the best and they're going to continue keeping up with the company. So it's always going to be somebody who's going to feel otherwise. But
I think it's subjective too. Like, I mean, any company you work for, if you've worked for a big company, people come and go. There's different reasons. And when I seen that, there were some people, I think it could have been QA people that were let go recently. I was like, okay, if there was a big push, sometimes they get more QA in there to test things out. And QA is not necessarily one of the top tier jobs that you're going to see either. So you're going to see things like people that are getting let go that, and of course some of those people might be salty, but again, you don't know the whole story behind everything. So I didn't really take much stock into that. Todd Pappy was a bit of a surprise, but even him leaving and, or because he didn't want to, I guess he had made the move to Manchester, but then it didn't work out. I mean, my wife's company, literally, they just had this year to where people that were in certain levels of management, if they didn't want to move to Salt Lake City, they were going to have to find another job. So it's not like it's just, CIG or just, it's localized to just them. It happens all over. It's just the reality of business these days.
To be honest, I don't think they've been hit as hard as I expected. After, like, they had an insane, if you look at their funding, their explosion in 2020 was insane. And it wasn't just because of COVID. That was also the year they got persistence working. So the game was just more fun. People were more interested in playing it. I mean, we were just talking about it. People will play 4.0 live instead of PTU because there's progression. People like progression. So when they added progression in 2020, it exploded. Like they almost doubled their funding, and they did it for a couple of years. So when it got to this point, it's a little bit stable, but it's also like, I didn't think that they would be able to keep growing like that. And I don't actually know where they are for this year. I think they've fallen a little bit short of last year, and I don't think that's a big deal, but it is worth noting that they, over the last 5 years, have gone from about 500 to 600 employees, I think, to over 1,000. They've purchased 2 different studio locations, I believe. They moved into a new location in Austin. They got a location in Manchester, and they moved into a location in Frankfurt.
Yeah, Germany.
Yeah. So they had 3 locations. They acquired Turbulent in Montreal. They're running an MMO environment year round. They are also running a test environment for a lot of that year, and they're trying to pay all these employees. Like, they're spending a lot of money. So it makes sense that they're changing a lot, they're moving around a lot, and they also consolidated studios, like you said, Casa, moving people over both to get tax breaks, to consolidate more teams together, like Rich was saying, and to probably just kind of take advantage of better efficiency. So there's a lot of movement, but there is also the possibility, it depends on who it is that's moving. Developers moving, junior developers moving is one thing that might be a big skill loss, but senior developers, directors, and people moving could be philosophy changes. And I'm wondering if you guys see any of that.
It's hard not to notice. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard not to notice that we haven't heard from Tony Z in a while, long while. It's hard not to notice that the Master Modes ISC, where they talked about like how they're going to change the flight model again in a pretty significant way, Yogi wasn't a part of that ISC, the champion of Master Modes for the last several years. So there's some oddities. I think it was Roger Godfrey just announced on Twitter like 2 days ago that he was leaving.
Yeah.
And he was very grateful, talked about all of his experiences and those things. So it's like, it's not a lot of like bombs going off, but there is some like kind of shifts that we haven't seen in a few years, And I think that also, going back to like laying off teams or like, sizing changes and stuff. I work at a hospital, and anytime we have a big project, we hire a lot of extra contractors. Now they're contractors, so it's a little different. But when that project's done, those contractors have to go find a new job. There's nothing for them to do here anymore. They might get hired on the next contract, because it's a hospital. They're always doing something. But it's the same kind of concept. It's a company. You're not just going to keep. This sounds mean, but you can't keep somebody around if you don't have something for them to do. So there are times where that restructuring is just part of normal business.
Mhm.
People talked a lot of guff about how they were working 7-day weeks before sitcom this last year, and I just saw it as fairly normal business practices. I've been at the hospital where I've been asked to work 65, 70 hours in a week, and it is what it is. Sometimes the landscape you're in at your job dictates that a little bit more has to happen, and as long as you're compensated for that, fair play. I didn't really see a problem with that at all. I didn't see that as like abusive work practice. People lost their minds about that, and it's like that happens in every business, construction,
Mhm.
IT. I mean, it's commonplace. It's development. It happens at development studios all the time. We just hear about it because it's fairly transparent. So I don't see a lot of big alarm bells going off. There are some oddities in the last like 6 months, I guess, in particular. Between like Todd and some other things that I've noticed, but that doesn't mean it's like big red flags and alarm bells yet.
I hear a
me.
lot of talk in the industry about, we see this happen where a game finishes up and a lot of people get laid off. It takes a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and people to make a game doesn't take as much to maintain or run it. So you're basically, you launch your game and you keep the skeleton crew on to keep it going and maybe build some DLCs. Could it be that we're seeing something like that as we finish up a chapter for Star Citizen, getting to 4.0? Obviously, Roger was working on server meshing, so getting that working could be like he's like, hey, dude, peace out. I'm done. I did my work.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think,
could it also be
part of it is Squadron 42. Like, it's one company making 2 games too. So it's
Right.
like if you have a bunch of Squadron 42 QA testers, however many that might be, and Squadron 42 is feature complete, like you're still gonna need the QA testers. But the point is, you have people doing things with Squadron 42, and then you announce that Squadron 42 is feature complete, and then your entire player base is surprised that you've let a few people go. It's like, well, we finished the stuff they were working on.
Yeah.
They don't have anything to do for that game anymore. Maybe not QA is a bad example, but you get my point. So it's like restructuring and stuff like that absolutely happens as as progress happens. It's not, you're not always going to keep the exact workforce that you had, especially in something like game dev.
I think high level changes as well is always a good thing, because it's good to have fresh minds take a look at issues and problems and take a look at it at a different angle. New ideas for things that have been stuck or whatever. So it's a shame to see people that have been around for a long time leave, for sure. But equally, like you say, I don't think it's alarm bells. I think it's just standard life. People change. People want to do different things. People have done the project for 10 years and they want to see something else. So, I don't see an issue with anything. People leaving and whatnot.
There's also the whole thing I hear this talked about with companies, where like the person who's good at taking a company from 0 to 100 employees is not the same person who's good at running a 2,000 person version of that company. Like you kind of, you have people who are good at certain things, you silo those responsibilities off, and then when they're done, you pass that on to somebody else who can take over from there. That could always happen. Not saying it is, but when you think about that in terms of who's running a business, it could also happen in terms of who's running a team or something. CasaBlack or Griffin, you guys have any thoughts on the way the teams and the structure of CIG has changed over the year?
Not really. I know there was one person that was part of the team that did like salvaging and stuff. And now we're seeing Torsten has kind of taken that role. I believe that's the one thing that I noticed, that I can't remember the guy's name, but he's no longer there. So that was kind of like seeing Torsten move up. I like his work and stuff, so that was pretty cool. But that was like one of the big ones that I noticed.
Dan Truffin?
Yes. Yep. Dan. Yep.
Yeah, Dan was actually he was kind of heralding the resource network when they were first starting to show that off.
Yes. Yep. He was.
Yeah, that is a bummer to see go. But there's been several people, like, is it Mark Abent was another one that people were really sad to see leave. He was a few years back, I think. But and then he showed up randomly during IAE this year.
Yeah.
Griffin, how about you? What's your feelings?
Oh, I was the one who opened up on this, but like I said, Paul Jones. I mean, I think part of the thing too is that a uniqueness about Cloud Imperium is the effort that Disco has done to introduce us to the devs. Yeah. And I think subconsciously we bond with these folks, and there's a dynamic of, I hate to use this word, but there's a dynamic of trust after a period of time, after years of watching these people. And when they leave, we actually feel it. It's and don't get me wrong, there's those nameless people that we don't know who leave all the time too. But I know when Paul Jones left, that was it felt weird, you know. But then there are the people like Sean Tracy's and others who've been with the company for literally 14 years and been with Chris for over those period of times. So, you know, again, I think XeroState's point on it is really good. I think DK Wildcat talked about that he's a software engineer and he's put in 105 hours in 2 weeks. I mean, there's that other side that we don't hear about, you know. So it's difficult to, like I said, I don't want things to be a red flag unless we see reasons. I mean, I think there would be evidences of other things that we would see if the company's not doing well or if there's dissatisfaction at a large level with the company. But I think CIG has pushed through, particularly through COVID. They were one of the companies because of their structure, with the remoteness of their work and everything else in this different studios that pushed through where a lot of companies struggled. So,
want to make a correction there. I meant Paul Jones, not Mark Haven. You reminded me right when you said that. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about the way things have gone this year. I personally think that they have shifted a little bit more towards a little bit away from a systemic, let everything boil and figure out how it's going to work on its own approach, more towards a gamey, we're going to set things up so that they do work the way we want it kind of thing, you know? I don't want to say the whole, we're going from sim to gamified approach sort of thing, but I do think that they have decided to move a little bit more away from systemic approaches to things in order to make sure that stuff actually works for the game. And I'm not sure if that's a employee thing, a philosophy thing. I don't know if that's like a Chris thing or what, but it might just be a deliver the game more quickly kind of thing. But I do think that's something I'm kind of noticing a little bit. I don't know how far it's going to go, but that's my take on that. Thank you guys for your thoughts on it, though. Let's talk about ships throughout the year. I know this is probably XeroState's favorite part. He was really excited about ships just constantly coming in throughout the year. But if you did have to pick a ship that stood out to you, that you would want to see come quickly, or maybe that already did come quickly, but you think was a really good addition this year that made a lot of sense from CIG, what was it?
Not the ES.
The Zeus ES?
Yeah, not the. I mean, there's no exploration gameplay to speak of.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll think on it.
I like I like the Star Lancer. For me, it came at a perfect time whenever I started doing cargo hauling with 324, and then I wanted something that was a little bigger than a Taurus, but not quite Hercules size. And so that came for me like at the perfect moment. I was telling people I wish they have a ship like this, and boom, it dropped. So I was pretty happy with it, even though I'm not a huge Misk fan, but it does its job.
I think the Metapen was a welcome surprise. I enjoyed that ship a lot. It was really fun to spawn it, and it all just worked, and it looked really nice.
What do you like about it?
The rumble seat. No. I mean, it's a unique, it's like something that people have been asking for years, and we just didn't really hear anything about it. And then all of a sudden it was like, cool, it's here. You know, it was a cool surprise. I think the community like universally pretty much likes it. And it adds like a significant amount of gameplay, because one of the other parts is like people are flying the Pisces Medical a lot, Cutlass Reds, that kind of thing. And it just kind of adds, like, it's like having another mining ship. Like if another mining ship came out tomorrow, it would have a similar effect, you know? It would just kind of be like, everybody liked this. When you're playing like Skyrim, and it's like everyone liked that or whatever.
What are there...
it's just something that makes everybody feel good. It's a good addition, and I enjoyed that ship a lot.
It kind of got overshadowed by the Intrepid coming out, huh?
Speak of the devil, that was the one I was gonna pick.
Okay.
I know some people hate the Intrepid, but I've never had a daily driver. I've got a lot of different ships, but never one that I would consider a daily driver. But that one for me fell into that category. And I know there's a lot of controversy about it, but for me, as soon as I saw it, that whole aesthetic thing was just the gun thing. And the ship to me just fit right into that area. For what the Cutter is to a lot of other people, that's what the Intrepid became for me. So.
Same kind of energy. The Cutter is still, I mean, the Intrepid, I like the Intrepid. It does make the Cutter seem that much more impressive for what it is. But I agree with you there. And I think it's funny that the Intrepid overshadowed the Metapen, because the Metapen is probably the more universally loved ship. But I think a lot of people almost expected it. Like it was so obvious a good choice, and so many people wanted it that when CIG announced it, people were just kind of like, yeah, I mean, of course. Why wouldn't they do that? But yeah, it was a good call on their part. Casa, how about you?
I said Starlancer, so.
Oh right, yeah.
I
That
like
is a
the
good ship.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually really like the Guardian. I know it's another combat ship, but it's such a cool looking ship. And there was two things that was going to be like, no, I don't like this ship. First one was the feet, because I don't like how the Nomad sits without feet. It's just weird. It
Yeah.
just needs a landing. That bothered me. And the other thing was when I saw it in ISC, I really was convinced, oh, it's not going to have an interior. That's such a disappointment. It's going to be another Fury, and I'm not going to be able to bedlog it and whatever. So when I got in the game and it looked as cool as I hoped it did, and it had an interior and it had feet, I was all in because it looks cool. It was very cool.
Yeah, I watched your video on it. Seeing you discover the interior was fun. My experience was similar. That ship has a lot more interior space than I thought it would. I will probably surprise some people, but I actually think one of my more exciting ships this year, I won't say it's the most exciting, but the Ironclad is just fits a really good spot in my mind for like just being in the game. I actually want to see NPCs flying Ironclads around because they seem like they'd make for a really good sort of like FPS level or just general thing in the fiction. But gosh, I don't know how long it's going to take for them to make that. They said they're working on it next year.
I'm fairly sure that it's called the Iron Chad. I might be wrong about that.
Yes. Yeah, I think that was
true.
Also known as the Fatterpillar.
Yep.
It's a nickname.
Yeah, so good.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's a cool ship. They're definitely seeming to focus more on large ships, which is fun, but we'll see how that works out for them.
No one said the Polaris. Interesting.
Yeah, it's old news now.
No,
sorry, nobody cares about the Polaris anymore.
Yeah, it's not a flyable Idris, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's what is it? Because the torpedoes don't work extremely well. It's not super interesting, I think, to a lot of people at the moment, but I still think it's a great home base kind of ship. I'm going to take that thing out all the time.
I think it's such a ship for org gameplay that it's difficult to see it from a solo player perspective, or just from like what's your favorite ship, because like my favorite ship is a ship that I can use, right? It's just where my brain goes. But if you ask the question like what is a ship that your org is most excited about, I think a lot of us probably would have said Polaris.
That's fair. Yeah. I want to go back to something you said, Ollie.
Okay.
You mentioned bedlogging in The Guardian, and that is, I think, one of the big revelations of this year that they haven't. It almost feels like when they first unveiled the idea that they would have character-focused skills of like, oh yeah, you'd work on something and it would boost your character skills. And people were like, wait, what? And it was a topic for 2 weeks, and then everybody we don't talk about it because they don't bring it back up. And I feel like it's the same with this whole idea that they're like, oh yeah, you guys are going to eventually be able to log out and in anywhere. It's not linked to beds or habs or anything like that. What do you guys think of that move going forward and that change to the game?
I think, first of all, the change they made with 4.0 in you spawning in the hangar is amazing from a content creator perspective when I want to make a video and I don't want to record me going to my ship for the 40th time. So it's like a good 10 minutes, right? Or if you have like a server crash or something bad happens, it's really, really annoying to have to do that train trip again. On the other side of the coin, though, I think it'd be super weird for new players. Just like the first thing you look at is an empty hangar. Like, okay, obviously you have the onboarding, but not everybody does that. So that's the other side of that coin.
Yeah.
And like part of spawning in Area 18 was always like you wake up in the hab. Like I remember they did a lot of work with like putting lights in your habs and stuff, and like other little aesthetic. And I know that like the hangar spawn is just part of like a mitigation thing. They're probably gonna get rid of that at some point. But there is kind of like a nice ambience to it where it's like it builds the lore for you a little bit as you wake up in your hab, you walk past the shops on the way out of Area 18, You get to see the city from the tram. So.
Yeah.
Pick up supplies. I mean, that's another big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Those
spawned me in my
postings,
hangar and I had to go back into the station to get the stuff I needed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm Area 18 resident, and I liked being able to come right downstairs and go right
I'll
in
be
and get my
glad.
stuff. But right now, I've got to get on the train to go get this stuff. So it's a mixed bag.
still go back.
I get it. Yeah,
I think-
it's a.
I think the missing missions and interactive NPCs in the cities is really making people not see the benefit of them. Like it's basically just somewhere to run through right now, and like you said, a couple of shops. There's not much reason to be there, so it just doesn't feel like there's any point in spawning in a city.
Yeah, no, I definitely would pick a space station in Pyro because you can grab all the stuff. You don't have, like, even if you spawn in the hangar, you can just go to cargo decks from there.
So does
assuming
the
the other way
Guardian
works.
does the Guardian having a bed make as big a difference to you then?
Yeah, because I mean, I'd much prefer to just go to an OM marker and just log out because I can quantum straight away when I start.
I mean, when they get rid of the bed logging, or not
Oh,
get
when
rid
they
of
get
it,
rid of
but
it.
when
I
they make
mean,
it so you
just-
can log anywhere.
That would be amazing. Just turn it off and turn it back on. And I'm still in the same place. Yeah.
So would you get rid of the bed in your Guardian for something else? Is what I mean.
What would I put there? I don't know.
A couch. I don't know.
I mean, if I could lay there and get more stamina, like a stamina boost for an hour or something, lay in the bed for 5, like, I don't know.
So it's worth the buff if they have something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One more debate I want to talk about that I think really popped up this year. It became a much bigger debate this year than any other year for pretty obvious reasons, things like the Polaris and engineering. But the idea, I might regret this, the idea of solo versus group gameplay is becoming a flashpoint for many people in the Star Citizen community. Many people think that one exclusively means you can't have the other. Many people think that one should be bigger the focus than the other. Where do you guys stand on this topic? And how do you feel like it's going to go forward with Star Citizen particularly?
I think that most people are guessing when they say what the game will eventually be. And the only thing that I can say is most of the MMOs that I've played in the past, most of your grinding time, most of your gameplay really is spent doing things on your own. Sometimes you're doing things loosely with a group, like a guild or something like that. But if you're going out getting crafting mats, most of the time you're ranging out by yourself. You know, you're killing mobs, you're doing PvE stuff, and you have things like dungeons, raids, etc. They're very group focused, impossible to do solo. I think it's important to have both, and I think CIG plans to do that. At the same time, I think that the people who are super hardcore, like the game is all about group gameplay, that's all it should be, I don't think you really want that game, because that game is going to be, hey, none of my friends are online, I have nothing to do.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that coin, the game, I think, needs to have those MMO qualities of, hey, I don't want to be solo, and there's something that you can only do with a group. I think CZs are a decent example of that right now, where it's like if you do them solo, your chances of completing them or winning or whatever are very, very low. So I think it's important to have gameplay like that, but at the same time, I think it's important to remember that, like, realistically, most of your player interactions in the future are probably going to be you and one other player most of the time. You're going to meet one other player on a trade route. You're going to meet one other guy in some FPS area at a distribution center or something like that. And so it's very important for that gameplay to be engaging and fun and in depth and have depth. So
you're one of those crazy radicals who thinks we should have both.
I'm one of those crazy people that everybody hates because it's middle of the road.
Sorry to see you, man.
But that's the difficult part is really for CIG, I think, is to focus on both of those things and do it well is one of the most challenging parts.
Yeah. I think some of the fear that we're seeing is so much of the gameplay has been focused on something that can be done solo, or just the game in general has been so easy that everything has been doable solo, that as we start to see more stuff that can't be done solo, it feels almost like you're taking away
Yeah, it
the
feels
ability of people.
exclusionary.
Yeah.
Because of what we're used to. Yeah.
It's just been an easy game.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I played MMO, so there was always that. And I'm bad. I'll join guilds, even in Star Citizen. I'm in orgs, and I still solo mostly. But it was cool for Save Stand to be able to have to group up for a couple of things. You could do some of that solo still, which was fine, and I enjoyed that. But I also enjoyed grouping up when I had to. But I'm also one of those players that if someone can find ways to do things solo, that's kind of meant to be, I'm okay with that. But I do think you should have both. I've played MMOs where people can master their class so well that they can go in and they're able to solo, maybe not a 12-man raid, but something that could take 3 to 6 players. So seeing people be able to come up with content like that and stuff, I think that's, perfectly fine.
That's a good point. Is like, maybe should they not build the game for these labels? Building a game that is meant to be tackled as one person might limit you. Maybe you want to build something that, it's almost like we put the labels on what's solo and what's not, right? You take a bounty mission, it doesn't necessarily mean it's solo gameplay.
Yeah, or like you're going to have that fool that's going to go out and solo create a space station by themselves.
Right. And you could, if you prepare enough, you could probably, like Zero said, you could take on a contested zone. So it's still technically solo possible gameplay. But do you think there's something specific that people are looking for when they reference solo, quote unquote, solo gameplay?
I think one of the difficult things is the game right now is kind of Sea of Thieves in space. And Sea of Thieves is a very easy game to play solo. You get group gameplay that, enhances it, just like Star Citizen. But it's like DayZ in space, or like Sea of Thieves in space. The goal is to make it a real MMO, And that's just such a different experience than Sea of Thieves and DayZ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And those games also are more PvP focused because they just don't have consequences for actions. And we're kind of lacking that, which is, I think, where you're kind of coming from. We still don't have those consequences we need.
Yeah, rep consequences, legal consequences in the game, hostility consequences are kind of eh. So, and I mean, and group consequences too. Like if I wrong somebody in another guild, someday I would expect them to, like their guild leader would talk to my guild leader and be like, hey, we're a gang of pyro, not a gang. You know what I mean? Like we're a group. In Elite Dangerous, this happens constantly. If somebody from your group kills another player from another group, your group's leadership will often hear from their group's leadership and say, hey, what happened here? Let's talk this out. Let's figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And that kind of politics is very important, I think, in a group centric MMO that you don't see in games as much, like DayZ or Sea of Thieves, etc.
Yeah, we can't even talk to each other right now in game. I mean, we can. You just don't know if you can or not. Yeah.
I was going to say as well, it's like pace.
Go ahead, Ollie. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of it is pace as well. I think some days I just want to jump on and go mining on my own, and the pace is slow, and I can, I don't know, listen to a podcast or an audiobook or something and chill out. And other days I want to go into a contested zone with some friends and we're going to get some stuff done. So I think Star Citizen has a lot in it, and it's a bit of an everything game. It has lots of stuff in it to do.
Yeah, definitely.
One day. So I think options is good. Like you can go mining, hand rock mining in a cave, or you can get in a mole and do that. So
yeah, I also think there's a sense of when people listen to an MMO requiring interaction with other people, they think that means you got to group up and run missions with other people, but it could mean something as simple as making a delivery for somebody or picking something up from someone, or even transporting somebody somewhere. You don't have to talk to them for that kind of stuff. It's multiplayer without multiplayer. And if CIG can figure out a way to make that easy and not force people to group up in voice comms just to get simple things done, I think that's good. They kind of talked about that with the base building. They're like, yeah, you could put in buy orders and somebody can ship the supplies or mine the supplies and ship them to your base. Like, that's multiplayer, but you're not you're not really actually playing with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I agree. I think that the idea of having both is a good thing. I think it's a monumental task based on Richard Tryer's opening at CitizenCon, where he said that some people ask if it's a PvP or PvE, if it's MMO or solo, and he went down this long list of things, and he said we want Star Citizen to be all of those things. I think that we're used to labeling, as you mentioned. We're used to wanting to slap a label on it because it confirms what we believe a game should be for ourselves. I was thinking about the multi-crew side of it, though, and to your point, Tomato, I think one of the things I feel that Chris Roberts is trying to do and CIG is trying to do is create what we would consider cooperative gameplay. As you mentioned, the example you gave about putting in a buy order. That's someone else who does something that helps further my gameplay, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we were in comms together or anything. It just means that there's a universe of people working together to make something happen, whether it's in a solo way or a multi-crew way. So I agree. I think that it's going to be a monumental task. That's all. I mean, to do it well, I think XeroState said it earlier, to do it well is going to be the thing, right? And have balance so that the solo player can come in and feel like I accomplished some things and I achieved some things and maybe I pushed myself further than I thought. But then the multi-crew people can come in and feel like they had a great experience too. It's going to take a lot for them to do that and to do it successfully. So I'm hoping that they will. I think that's what they're trying to do. I think that the player base just has to give them that mental space to do that. And we have to be careful because we all want a certain thing from Star Citizen based upon our game experiences. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those wants are based upon me, but I'm not thinking about everybody else, but I want everybody to experience it. I like what Ollie said. Sometimes I just want to come in and be by myself and fly around and do some stuff. And then there's other times where I group up with people. And I'm one of those people, if you say, Griff, I need somebody to load my C2. Some people say, I never want to load a thing. I'll load it. Call me. I'll come load it,
exactly.
At a discount price, because that's something I enjoy doing, So I think that there's going to be all types of players in the universe. And so we just have to give room for that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the mining example was a good one because it's not only is that gameplay that you can do solo or as a group, it's not being custom made by CIG to fit some specific group of people or type of person or player. But it is also something that it's not PvP. A lot of these lines are also drawn between PvE and PvP content. And a lot of content in this game isn't inherently PvP just because it's made for multiple people. There's like a lot of other types of ways to play. So appreciate all your inputs on that and today's talk overall. To wrap things up here, I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to head on out. How did you feel overall about this year? From beginning to end, and now that we're wrapping things up, and I realize that things might change a little bit depending on what happens with 4.0 over the next few days, but just from where we are now, how you feeling about 2024?
I'll jump in first. I've been in here since 2013, so it's been a long ride. I'm okay. I'm an older guy. I'm 61 years old. I may not get to see this game like you guys will. Maybe my arthritis will kick in. I don't know whether I'll be here, but I'm okay. I do worry about the community. I don't worry about CIG. I do worry about how well the community will continue to. I think as there's progress, and I think that 1.0 was something we needed to hear. I think that was something that we needed to hear, that there was a goal, that there was a place where we would see what Chris called as a viable commercial, stable game that would be out. We don't know what that window is still, but I felt like that was something that we needed to hear after so many years. It's interesting to talk to people who've been around a long time versus people who've been around for 2 years, 3 years. They definitely feel very differently. But sometimes there are people who've been around 2-3 years and they feel just as salty as people who've been around for 10 years. But this year I felt like the server meshing 4.0 goal was important. And I'm glad they've gotten us at least this far. And I'm looking forward to 2025 and obviously 2026 with Squadron 42.
Fingers crossed for that. Don't come back at us with a 2028, please. Thank you.
Just 2 years away forever.
How about the rest of you guys?
No. I'll say I'm actually pretty pleased with this year. Like the CitizenCon, not the one we just had, the one previous, they delivered a lot of what we saw. I feel like the UI changes. There was a lot of tech that we saw. We had our first glimpse of server meshing, like actually presented to us, and then like we're here now and it works. Everyone, well, for somewhat has been able to access it and try and play it. So I think like it's actually been a good year for progress. It's a very different. Sometimes I look back at videos I did a year ago, and I see how much the game's changed. I think it's easy to forget. Actually, it's changed quite a bit in the past year. So, 4.0 does need to be stable quickly.
Yeah.
But if that happens, it's definitely a success. And I'm happy, I think.
Okay.
With this year.
I think for me, Ollie brings up a really good point. It is easy to lose yourself in what feels like realism and be like, patch isn't very stable. I'm frustrated. This year was a disaster. But I frequently think this, and I say it sometimes. It would be kind of interesting for like April Fools or something if CIG would put up a build of like what the game was like 2 years ago that you could play, like 319 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And just be like, hey, log in for a day and see what you see, and just remind the community of the progress that's happened.
So see how you like it.
Yeah, and we would log into this hellscape of 319, or just like, where's my hut? Where's every box is one SCU. What am I doing? And then it would kind of remind people like, hey, there has been quite a bit of progress. The game is quite a bit different landscape than it was even a year or two ago. Does that excuse some of the frustrations? I don't think so, but at the same time, it's important to keep that in perspective, that like, and when I said this, I think everybody said this at one point, like, hey, watch out, community. When the day 4.0 goes live, it's not going to be a fun experience. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I said that 100 times when they first kind of announced what they wanted to do for server meshing in 4.0, like the day that server meshing in 4.0 comes live, like it's not going to be a fun experience. And here we are, and I kind of forgot my own advice. You know what I mean? Because you're in it, right? It's just you forget the perspective. That I had my own perspective a year ago was the day that it goes live is going to be a rough day. And it is. So,
I then, if that was your expectations a year ago, then I would wonder: would you expect stories like what Ollie was saying to be coming out that same day?
Which stories?
That he was like just did 4 hours of like a good time in 4.0 and everything was running really well?
I think it's like with anything, somebody's going to have a good experience and other people aren't.
Yeah. So hit or miss.
Yeah, it's important to critique when people aren't, because like when it goes to live, like CIG's website right now says the words early access game on it. It doesn't say pre-alpha.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so it's like we do kind of expect a minimum viable product. It's like, I want to be able to log in, I want to be able to fly my ship somewhere, and I want to be able to do a mission. You know? And right now you can't do any of those things. So like the critique and the expectations and the things that the expectations of like how it should be at this point in the development, I think is still important to keep at the forefront. But also in the back of your mind, you got to go, hey, I everybody did say right when 4.0, right when server meshing comes out, just expect some weirdness, and you got to kind of temper that expectation and temper that instant reaction of frustration with that knowledge. I had this knowledge, I knew what it was going to be, and I shouldn't complain. I shouldn't outright complain, but that doesn't mean I can't have reasonable expectations.
Yeah. We have we have plenty of history to base our judgments on.
Yeah. Anyway, my answer to overall this year, I would say not surprised and also surprised at the same time. I'm not surprised that they rushed 4.0 in at the last minute and kind of dropped some things, like I said earlier. But I'm also surprised that 4.0 made it in at all. So, and that server meshing mostly works with 500 or 600 players. That's pretty cool.
That is that is nice. Cass, how about you? Think you're mute. Oh, okay, sorry.
Sorry. Going into the year, I think I was kind of, hesitant to think that they were going to get a lot of what they announced about 320, before 323. I was pleasantly surprised to see a lot of that came in when it did, even though it was kind of delayed a little bit. It didn't quite make that March date. But overall, this year became like an evolutionary year versus a revolutionary year. We didn't get a lot of content per se, excluding Pyro, of course. Pyro is kind of a lot of content, but we saw a lot of big things go in that are like things that are going to be built off of for the future. So the hope here going into next year is that maybe we can start to see more content. If we can see more content, because content can pick up a lot easier, that there's a lot of things that could go in that could really make things kind of fill out more. So I think overall this year was really a building year. I feel like we probably had building years for probably like the last 3 years now, especially since 3.18. But
A whole bunch of building.
yeah, a lot of things to build off of. Overall, I would have liked to have seen engineering get in there, of course. I think because they kind of teased that we could possibly see engineering by summertime, and then that got pushed back to Pyro or whatever. That was like one of the big things I was kind of let down by. But overall, I think, especially them getting 4.0 out as they did, even though it's kind of crazy the way they did it, I still think it was a positive year. And I think hopefully the team themselves will go out there feeling like they accomplished something, and maybe they can kind of build off of that going into next year.
You mentioned engineering, and it reminds me of this random time when Torsta went on Star Citizen Live and told us that engineering was coming probably sooner than we expected.
Right. Yeah.
I'm glad that they don't do that as much anymore. Or at least I hope they don't, because it just never ages very well. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think there were plenty of small disappointments this year littered throughout, problems with communication and deliveries and delays and stuff. But I do think that the overall narrative of releasing 4.0 this year and getting a server mesh environment helps them a lot. Like, we all will say, oh yeah, they're doing it just so that they can say they did it. But look at us here at the end of the year, judging the year's success on the fact that we are playing in a server mesh environment. So it works out for them. Yeah, quote unquote. But it's also a little bit disappointing to be like, well, if you take 4.0 away, then how does the year look? And I think that they need to focus on making sure that the year as a whole is feeling that same sort of good progressive energy, not just that one patch at the end of the year that kind of wraps everything up. Because that's how last year was too. Everybody was feeling pretty rough about last year until the end of the year when CitizenCon happened and the good news hit. And it's like, I hope that we can start to hit more consistent good updates again. And it sounds like maybe that's what they're trying to do with the letter from the chairman. So we'll see.
Yeah. On Casa's note too about like the game, like the content coming in. What's interesting is like there's kind of, I shouldn't say small systems, but there's like little things that could come in that could just unlock the door to huge rooms of content. Reputation, right? Mm-hmm. Open up reputation. Like if you open up that door of reputation and you start like dealing with the gangs of Pyro and reputation for all these mission givers, like how much gameplay does that add to the game? How much content does that give you? Yeah. The ability to manage your rep and have hostility based on rep and all these, and trade and profit based on rep and missions based on rep. And the depth, if you can open the door to that room, that's like it just enhances this layer, this base layer that we have, and just builds content on top of it instantly. Give the players the tools to build their own content, and they will build mountains of it.
Yep.
And crafting is the other side of that too, because that's another thing that could really open things up.
Yeah. As far as content goes, they don't really need too much to make for a really good experience for people. They, like you're saying, add some reputation stuff, maybe bounty hunting, some crafting, and like more missions. I think it'd be pretty good with a functioning economy. It'd be a very good game experience.
Yeah,
but
and MMOs aren't built on missions, in my opinion. They aren't built on quests. That's just fair. Quests are what you do to grind levels and maybe get some gear and things like that. But really MMOs are built on the interaction between players. And so if you can create good gameplay and depth of gameplay with interactions between players and the factions in the game, then I think that's what makes your MMO.
True. Yeah. Closing thought, as I see in the chat, a question that I think wraps this up quite nicely is how many players care about server meshing? I think the real question is how many players care about the things that server meshing allows, and that's the importance of it coming into the game. Is that stability? Is their ability to move past some of their other roadblocks, to refactor the missions, to refactor transit, to do a bunch of stuff that was locked behind the back end, I think is the most important thing they accomplished this year. But that's it. Thank you all for joining me so much. I'm going to give you a real quick chance to once again tell people where they can find you and your content before we head off. But thanks for joining me for this review of the year and sort of leaving off on where you feel at the end of the year. Hopefully next year is a better one. XeroState, where can folks find you?
Well, I'm on Twitch a lot. I post dumb stuff on Twitter or X, depending on what you call it. I still call it Twitter because I think it's funny to call it that.
Dude, yeah.
I'm going to call it Twitter
X
until they change the name back to Twitter, and then I'm going to start calling it X, I think.
Weird.
No, Twitch is where you mostly find me. I have some dumb YouTube videos, but I don't really post anything there because I don't have time. You know what I mean? And probably find me hanging out in other streamers' chats and stuff too, because I'm a viewer as much as I am anything else. So that's pretty much it for me.
Cool. Thanks for coming, Ollie.
Oh, and my expectations. I hope this next year builds on server meshing in the manner of like, I'd love to see like reputation and org gameplay. You know, maybe base
Reputation,
building.
definitely. Yeah, seriously. Ollie, my friend.
Hello. You know what? I'm gonna send people to my Twitch as well. I've been enjoying a bit of Twitch streaming lately. I do also do YouTube content, but yeah, I really enjoy recording videos live is how I describe it. So that's my thing these days. But expectations for next year, I would love the beacon system and like cool orders and stuff. That would be great. And stability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, if I can make my own missions for players, I think that would be great.
Gosh, that'd be sick.
Yeah.
Beacon gameplay, please. CasaBlack, my friend.
Yeah, I mostly do YouTube videos here and there. I do a lot of guides. When the roadmap is interesting, I throw stuff out there for that. I can concur. Ollie is very entertaining on Twitch. We watched him while we were out of town over the last week, so that was interesting. But anyway, as far as my hopes, scanning, that's what I'd like to see.
Ooh. That's a weird one. FPS scanning, something's going on with that. And I'm thinking maybe it's like they want to make it so that it interacts with everything in Star Citizen first, but they definitely sounded like they expected us to be using it much earlier, even in just the preview channel. I'm wondering what's going on with that feature, but I also hope it comes by. Thanks for joining, CasaBlack. Griffin.
Hey, everybody. GriffinGaming RPG. Once again, Soul Citizens on all the social media platforms. Yeah, you can find us there. I'm getting ready to run right now to go to my afternoon show. But thank you to everybody who's here today. I watch all these guys. They're all great, except for the Space Tomato guy. Forget about him. But all these other guys are great. So I really appreciate all the stuff that you guys contribute to the community, especially my buddy Space Tomato. So thanks for
Don't worry,
inviting me
I'm gone. It's fine. Whoa, what happened? Oh my God. Well, hello. I'm very big now. This is a great way to end it. Thanks again for joining me, everybody.
Dad, he's gonna eat us. Help.
Dude, what is wrong with OBS? Hold on, can I still get in my camera? Here we go. Okay, I'm still technically in my spot. Thanks everybody for coming to the podcast. If you can't see the video, then you probably don't know what we're cracking up about, but this has been Citizen Central, the final of the year. A good joy, good fun, and a good review of the year. I'd like to thank everybody once again for coming on. I hope to see you all next year on Citizen Central and Launch Sequence. And stick around if you are here for the live stream, as we are doing this live on YouTube and Twitch. I will be jumping into 4.0 for a little bit here, so you guys will get to see kind of how the game is performing after this whole talk. Yeah, we'll see if I can even load in, but stick around. We'll have like a couple minutes intermission, and then I will be back with you in a little bit. Thanks again for coming to the Citizen Central podcast, everybody. I am Large Space Tomato Head signing off, and I'll see you next year.